Oh, I'm ready to go home. I should. That was amazing. You know what? No, I don't need to be seen. Whoops, I don't need to be seen. That's good. Sorry, I brought my towel. I'm not usually this needy here. Thank you so much. How beautiful. This is an incredible thing. Liz is so right. This community, this Portland Writers community, is astonishing. It's given me something I didn't realize I needed. I'm really honored and humbled to be amongst these other amazing writers today. Thank you so much. So, this is a chapter from my memoir. It's called I Hate San Francisco. The first time I was in San Francisco was for my mother's wedding, her third wedding, back in the mid-70s. I was already a married woman with 2 small children of my own, and she was having a wedding with bridesmaids. And a bridal shower. With games. I mean, come on. That was one weird trip. The ceremony was at the giant redwood grove near the Russian River, owned by the Bohemian Club, of which my stepfather-to-be was a member. And since he was a member, he was allowed to escort women onto their sacrosanct ground. We had grown up surrounded by East Coast bleeding heart liberals, and my mother was tying her lot to this whole new thing. In its founding days, the Bohemian Club may have attracted artistic types, but soon after it became an enclave for power-wielding, mostly Republican mucky-mucks like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. The Manhattan Project took place there. Need I say more? So I really didn't have time to develop a hatred for San Francisco during that visit, more like a deep discomfort. The hatred started on the next visit when I brought my children. My mother and her new husband said they wanted to take us to dinner because nowhere in the world are there better restaurants than in San Francisco, and we've been everywhere. We got dressed up and drove to what was indeed a fancy restaurant. The maitre d' motioned us to follow, and my mother said, "Smoking table, please." He said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have no tables available in the smoking section." And my mother scanned the restaurant, pointed to a table near the window, and said, "What about that table?" "I'm sorry," he said, "that is not in the smoking section." "Or that one," she said. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we have no tables available in the smoking section." She raised her voice and threatened that she would never come to this restaurant again, the thought of which probably made that guy's day. And then, as if she were doing him a big favor, she agreed to eat there anyway, and we were led to a table in the non-smoking section. My 2 very young children were uncharacteristically quiet, probably confused about what this whole public hissy fit was about. I, of course, was mortified, trying to silently apologize to all the other patrons who couldn't hide their disdain. Then, to top it off, our waiter arrived to take our drink orders, and my mother said, "Please bring me an ashtray." Her brazenness was a thing to behold. I wish I had just a smidgen of the chutzpah this woman had, but in situations like this, well, I was just beat-faced embarrassed. What followed was a predictable back and forth that involves him saying it's a non-smoking table and her saying she smokes, she has rights, and she would like an ashtray, and him saying he's sorry, that's impossible, and her getting louder and more insistent, and him apologizing again, and her finally saying, "Do you know who I am?" "No, Mother, he does not know who you are. Nobody knows who you are, at least not in the way you mean it, not in the way you hunger." My next visit, I joined my mother and her husband on a house hunting trip in the city since they had been living in his bachelor apartment. I'd never criticized my mother's real estate instincts. It's not that. She was smart and shrewd. But that trip, riding in the cramped-up excuse for a back seat in a Fiat Spider, it's like I was a prisoner forced to witness something dreamt up by Edward Albee. Bickering does not do it justice. Belittling, debasing, disdain, followed by some passive or passive-aggressive retort. "Don't bother fighting, man. She'll get her way in the end. We both know that. Everybody knows that." The trip after was planned so I could attend the opening of a play my stepfather wrote, a play called Everybody's Favorite City, by which he naturally meant San Francisco, so already I'm nervous. For weeks beforehand, I'd heard all about how many famous people would be there, how they were sure it would be a long run, how they had such great pre-show buzz. I'm not sure I can paint a picture that does this justice. First, there were about 6 people in the audience, and none of them were famous. Second, it was a musical with really, truly, ridiculously awful music. The story was a circle jerk exercise about how lucky they are to live in San Francisco, a city where every single soul in the whole fucking wide world wants to live, that they were the lucky few, blah, 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 blah. 3 of the 6 people in the audience left after about 20 minutes, and I spent the rest of the time trying like hell to figure out what I could possibly say after it was finally blessedly over. It was the apotheosis of pathetic. On my next trip, I visited on my own. My plan was to help around her apartment with things that she couldn't do, hadn't gotten around to, or hadn't noticed needed doing. I'm cool with that. It was much easier to talk while I was cleaning the oven or sorting through massive piles of paper. She needed to go to the bank and take care of some business, but when we got there, there was a long line. Let me take a minute here to say that the concept of a line never meant anything to my mother. At worst, a line only made her charge to the front a little less direct. I held on to the sleeve of her coat, trying to keep us in our proper place in line, but I was no match for that dame. She marched up to the front of the line, right past all the other people like she owned the damn place, leaned close to the window, and started talking to the teller. As I exchanged conspiratorial looks up and down the line, trying to silently say, yes, I know, she's a piece of work, I'm so sorry. The teller did her best to inform my mother that there were other people ahead of her, which she kindly returned to the end of the line. Someone will be with you as soon as possible, all the while my mother's voice getting louder, more insistent, more imperious, culminating in, do you know who I am? Again, no, Mom, no one knows who you are. This wasn't the last time I witnessed my mother hurling that pseudo-question at someone she felt had wronged her, but that question has been persistent. Do you know who I am? I do not, Mother. I do not know who you are. You are a maddening mystery. And because it makes me feel just a little better to believe that you acted not intentionally, not maliciously, but rather out of psychological myopia and sheer lack of insight, it's a good guess that you didn't know who you were either. You surely didn't know who I was. How could you? There was no room in there for any other living soul. Dan Siegel, who is a leading expert in the field of child development, talks about the importance of the mother's gaze. He's being literal here. How an infant sees herself reflected in the loving gaze of her mother impacts how the infant grows to feel about herself and her place in the world. The mother's eyes act as a mirror, reflecting back a loving, safe, secure image for the child to absorb. I doubt my sister and I had that. Understand, I do believe that my mother loved me, at least to the extent that she was capable. But her own sucking need for validation was so strong, I highly doubt her gaze provided us with a sense of security and self-worth. I often think of a line in the movie Mother, when Debbie Reynolds tells her son, played by Albert Brooks, that she loves him. He patiently replies, I know you think you do. So when I think about my mother's cringeworthy reproof, do you know who I am? Now I hear it less as a rebuke and more as an actual question. I hear her asking this of herself in some kind of desperate effort to fill a bucket that clearly has a giant hole in it. And I hear it as a question I've been grappling with myself for decades, early on looking to others, read men, to define me, and only in my later years developing what I would call a reliable sense of myself. When you combine the parental pathology with the utter lack of information about family history, it's no mystery why that question would become a lifelong inquiry for me. So, San Francisco is decidedly not my favorite city, even if they might have the best restaurants on planet Earth. I know I can't claim legit PTSD. That would be way too princessy and too dismissive of all the people who have all the reason in the world to startle at a car backfiring. But when I'm there, as soon as the plane starts its descent, I start feeling it, the bracing, the carapace forming over my heart, all the ways I have felt smaller and undone, and wishing mightily that I could have been a better person.
Mm-hmm.